Hello, BillWhittle.com members. I'm Steve Green, and this is your members only right angle for the week of, oh my gosh, it's the first week of October 2018. I can't believe that. Anyway, you know what time it is, don't you? Bill, Scott? It's time for another lightning
You're
round.
killing me time. You're killing me, Larry time. That's what time it is.
That's right, gentlemen. I have hand-selected, curated, collated 6 artisanally selected headlines just for the
Aggregated.
Aggregated. Yes, there's a good word. Aggravated is probably more accurate, though. All right, let's just jump right in. Scott, I love this headline. I told you I had a tech issue for you. Here it is. Why are college students not voting absentee? Well, it turns out the answer is they don't know where to buy a postage stamp. Has our high-tech world just left these kids behind?
You know, if you can't lick them, join them. Apparently, see, there's some old humor for you. Back in the day when you licked a postage stamp. Imagine that.
That
of course,
taste.
these kids don't even know that there are postage stamps, let alone that they didn't used to be self-adhesive.
And if you had to do a bunch of them, you felt it, man.
Oh.
You had to get the sponge.
Remember when they tried making a mint flavor and it just made it worse?
You know,
I ate about 10,000 stamps that day.
back when I was a kid, they didn't even have glue on the stamps. You actually had to go out and slaughter an old nag and render it and create your own stamp glue.
You cannot make glue out of Dianne Feinstein, Scott.
I was thinking Hillary Clinton. That's so funny that you mentioned that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to distract the boys like this. I think it's fascinating because there are still vestiges. You know, it's kind of like Bill's car can be referred to by how many horsepower it has. Nobody makes that mistake with my car. There's not even a suggestion that a single horsepower exists under that hood. But, you know, there are things like horsepower. On my phone, there's actually an icon for the phone part of the phone where you can actually make a phone call. And that icon is a little handset from like 1972.
Which they've never seen.
Yeah, it's like, but kids got to be looking at that like, what is that? You know what you have on your phone too? If you're an Android user, you can customize your phone. So you could download an alternative dialer. Dialer?
Oh, like
You
a
can
rotary
a
dial?
smartphone?
What the heck? No, well, I'm sure there is an app where you can actually dial, but they refer to the little keypads as dialers. You know, I had a guy recently who told me that he was going to keep my information in his Rolodex. And I texted him back and said, "You have a Rolodex?" He's like, "No, it's just an expression. Get me a Kleenex." I mean, it's just like we live with the accumulated history of things that for this generation must be mystifying, and they just mouth those words. So I kind of feel sorry for them, and yet somehow I'm glad they're not voting.
Yeah, indeed. In fact,
Like if you can't figure that out, I don't want you at the polls.
We need to make it harder to vote. Although, you know, I just realized, Scott, when you brought up all these terms that have been obsolesced by the internet, when the last Gen Xer dies, I think the last of these terms dies too. That's humbling. Bill, Andrew Cuomo holds wide lead in gubernatorial race, but likability hits new low despite record unfavorability. Democratic incumbent up by 22 percentage points over Republican Mark Molinaro. What does it say about the blue states when the most unlikable, inept, and corrupt governor, perhaps in New York history, is up 22 points over the Republican?
You know, we've said this many times. The best minds of people that have a conservative bent go into either the military or business, and the best minds of people who have a progressive bent go into politics. They go into politics because in order to be really successful in politics, you have to have no sense of honor, character, or decency at all, and that's become pretty clear lately.
Yeah.
And they outnumber us greatly in this regard. So the overall point would be to say that anytime you look at a Republican-Democrat race, we're playing their A team, and we've got our girls' junior varsity team out there, and sometimes they beat them. I don't know much about the New York race. I know that in California we're looking at the same thing, not by that kind of margin, but still. And I don't want to confuse anybody because I'm going to go out and vote straight Republican like my life depended on it. But having seen the Republican challenger, I realized that we live in such a post-truth age that charisma and rhetorical intelligence trump everything, if you'll pardon the expression, because that was the one case where we had somebody who had rhetorical intelligence, and a willingness to fight back on the same level he was being attacked at. That's why he's president. That's why there's still some hope. So I think, Steve, people have gotten so dumbed down, and there's been so many generations now that has not been taught to think critically, that you really do go with the person you like the most. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking about this myself. I mean, my first vote, God, this is members?
You have to think, yeah.
It is members.
Yeah.
Okay. So my first vote was for Walter Mondale. And I voted for Walter Mondale because he said he was going to raise taxes. And that was good to me because I wasn't paying any taxes. I thought Ronald Reagan was going to get us all killed. When he walked away from Iceland, I thought it was the end of life on planet Earth. I didn't realize that the man had the smarts and the historical knowledge to say, no, this bargaining chip is the one that's going to end the Soviet Union, not through missiles, just going to outspend them. All of the things that I used to passionately believe in, I knew nothing about. And this is the result of, ultimately, it's a result of the failure of the education system. This is the first thing that the left infiltrated. And if you're going to have left-wing politicians stealing your money and providing nothing in return, the first thing you got to do is make sure that nobody knows anything different and has the ability to say, say something like, hey, well, we need governments in order to provide the roads. Well, what if there was no government to provide the roads, and what if you had to pay for the roads out of your own pocket? What would you do? Well, I'd shop around until I found the very best road I could get for the very lowest price. That's exactly correct. And that's not what's happening now. Now you're getting the very worst road you can get for the very highest price. See how it works? But these kind of skills are no longer taught, and they're not likely to come back.
Steve, I don't think Andrew Cuomo's plight should be a mystery to anybody who watched the 2016 presidential election. The Democrats nominated the most unlikable candidate they could find on the national scene.
That is such a great point. Yes.
Not just on the national scene, the most unlikable person on planet Earth throughout the history of the species. And that's actually quite an achievement if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Stalin was charming. Hitler was kind to dogs. I've got nothing in that regard to say nice about Hillary. What are you going to do?
Yeah, there you go.
Scott, I want to talk about sustainability because I'm concerned about the environment. No, this really is a sustainability issue, just not in the usual way the left means it. In fiscal year 2018, federal fiscal year, the debt is up by $1.27 trillion in one peacetime year. Well, no major war. And the feds borrowed $8,172 per every American with a job. That is, per American who actually pays taxes. Wow, where does this end?
Apparently it doesn't end. And even though there are many laudable things you could say about what both the Republican Congress and President Trump have done since he came into office, this is really an unaddressed issue by and large. Now, what they are doing to address it, by the way, I shouldn't say unaddressed, but they could be doing more. There's not a great focus on cutting spending at the federal level. There's not a great focus on reforming the entitlement programs, which are, of course, the things that are the cash-sucking leeches of this entire mess. There is some, obviously, tax breaks, which I think fuels the economy, rising GDP. All of that is good. But as you've seen in the past, when the GDP rises and therefore tax revenues rise, and they've been kind of up and down during the course of the last 2 years, but generally trending upward, tax revenues rise. That doesn't inspire Republicans to say, hey, what a great time to cut back spending and to pay down debt. In fact, they say, what a great time to buy that, that military program, that piece of equipment that we've wanted to buy, or what a great time to throw some money around. So I still haven't seen anybody in Washington, D.C. with a real commitment to nibbling away at that debt or setting in place any kind of a long-term plan. Or even with all the talk about infrastructure spending, and certainly the United States needs that at the state, local, and federal level. We've got some infrastructure issues. I still don't hear a single person saying, when you build a road, you have to include a sinking fund for its maintenance. because eventually that thing is going to start falling apart, and you're not going to have the money, and you're going to have to borrow it to do it. So somewhere out there must be a conservative, fiscally conservative Republican who's not just standing up crowing about his positions on social issues or how strongly he supports the president.
Yeah, and Scott,
And
sorry,
by the
go ahead,
way,
Bill, yeah.
No, and by the way, after watching Washington in this week, that's exactly what the very best minds in America want to do, is these honest men and women who've worked their entire lives in order to save money and run a business well, they can't wait to get to Washington, D.C., and they just can't wait to become part of this government because it is absolutely the most pleasant experience that they'll ever undergo in their entire lives.
So ugly. And by the way, Scott, you might talk about military spending or infrastructure spending, but the fastest growing line item in the federal budget is interest on the debt.
On the debt, that's right.
And in the next few years, it's set to be bigger than defense. And in a few years after that, it's set to be bigger than Medicare and Medicaid combined, just paying the interest on the money we already borrow. All right. Let's lighten this up, please. Woman refuses to pull over because she's a Prius driver. Apparently, this cop.
Is this a California man
It's a
story?
California story. It happened on I-5, my friend.
I'm a California man.
The driver made no attempt to stop on the highway after the flashing lights of the CHIP patrol officer behind her, and instead exited a mile later before finally stopping at an intersection. From there, the highway patrolman ordered her to pull over using his loudspeaker. His lights are still going.
Yeah.
The woman, I've lost her, I think it's Louise Petrazzi, declined to cooperate, forcing the trooper to approach the side of the car and instruct her to pull off the road. And she said, apparently out the open window, "I will not, I drive a Prius." Is this the most California story of all time?
It's the most California story so far.
Wait, it'll be worse
It's
next
right
week,
up.
yeah.
No, it's right up there with the apps to determine where the human feces is on the streets of San Francisco.
Yeah.
I remember that show, The Streets of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And as I remember, it wasn't about
Poop.
minding your step. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is well, as it turns out, my episode this week is called "Oh My God, They're Full of Crazy," and it is crazy. I mean, it's common to talk about your opponents as crazy and other guys nuts, as Republicans nuts, everybody's nuts. But we're now approaching a point where I think you can make a pretty compelling actual case for a diagnosable mental illness. And I want to be clear about this because the whole idea of diagnosing your opponents as mentally ill goes right back to the Stalinist system. I'm not saying that they're mentally ill because of the politics that they have. I'm saying that when you run into people like this, their disconnect from reality is so large that you really are starting to look at people who really have an actual serious clinical problem. And this was one of my most early points on the Kavanaugh thing. I said, if you were to take Brett Kavanaugh and Chrissy Ford and send them off to 10 independent psychologists who didn't know who they were, who didn't know anything about them, and have a full-on 2-day psychological run-up of both of these people, I'm quite convinced, in fact, I bet my life on it, that Brett Kavanaugh comes off as a far saner person in every one of those analyses. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's right and she's wrong, but I don't think there's much question about it. And when you have somebody that says, I'm not going to pull my car over because I drive a Prius, you've now reached the point of virtue signaling and disregard for law and sheer emotionalism that you begin to wonder if these people are actually quite there, and they're not. And by the way, this is going to get worse and worse and worse because the whole self-esteem movement is predicated on the fact that you always get everything you want and you don't have to do anything unpleasant. So why should you have to pull over to the side of the road if you don't want to? I mean,
Yeah, guys who drive
that's
SUVs,
fascism.
we have to pull over.
And Steve, she's not speeding and breaking the law. She is hurrying to heal the planet. The faster you drive in a Prius, the faster the
That's right.
atmosphere gets scrubbed.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The more virtue is generated. That's right. The faster you go, the more virtue you generate.
Well, that's
little virtue.
that's-
They should have like little perfumed purple clouds come out of the back of the Prius, and they should be able to say that these are carbon dioxide absorbers, and you could make a frickin' fortune if you sold those things in this state.
Oh,
and
It's
I gotta
power.
go. I got a
Retire
very good idea.
It's powered by Unicorn Tinkle.
All right, Scott, another great Lindsey Graham headline. I think this was on Sunday. Lindsey Graham says he wants the FBI probe to include Dianne Feinstein's handling of Blasey Ford allegations.
Yeah.
How about that? Is he our new man? How did that happen?
I actually like that, and for a weird reason, I despise the crowing about things like that, which I see in the media all the time. And it's like, oh, our guy really stuck it to their guy. Like,
But this isn't sticking it to him. This is calling for genuine
but I know what you
thing.
mean. Lindsey Graham destroys.
I totally agree with the action. I totally agree that Dianne Feinstein's office should be investigated to find out why allegations of a very serious nature came to her attention and were held in secret, along with in secret at the Washington Post and elsewhere. But that is important. And I think I heard Mitch McConnell speaking today. And I thought it was a great speech, but he had this little sort of snideness about him where he was like sarcastically jabbing the other side. Now, I know that a lot of people on the right go, wow, good job, Mitch. You really stuck it to them. But I just wanted to go, Mitch, talk like this stuff means something to you, will you?
Yeah.
It's not a frickin' joke.
You
I mean,
know?
this is our republic, and you're talking like it was some sort of little thing where, oh, I scored a point, you scored a point, now I scored a point. Stop playing around with the lives of people. Stop playing around with the greatest government that's ever been formed in the history of the world, and you're fiddling while it burns.
Well,
Sorry.
the greatest government in the
apologize.
history
That
of
was
the world
epic.
is like the greatest haircut in the flock of seagulls. So let's. I'll leave that there.
Troubling.
Final headline.
I'm going with the bass player.
Final headline for Bill. And this is a cultural issue that's kind of cute, but I think it's also kind of important. It was a column that I found. I don't even remember the name of the publication or the name of the guy who wrote it, and it's missing from my notes here. But the headline was, Why Kanye West's SNL stunt showed real courage. His rant against Democrats was more fun and interesting than the celebrity-endorsed jokes against Kavanaugh that took up the rest of the show. And what does it say about us, Bill, where it actually takes courage to wear a MAGA hat on a freaking sketch comedy show?
To wear a MAGA hat in New York City at a taping of Saturday Night Live requires enormous reserves of moral courage, and anybody who thinks that's not the case has no idea what it's like to be in the middle of this milieu. It is, I for many years, and I mean, since I've known of Kanye West, I have maintained that he has the most diseased ego on planet Earth. That he thinks he's Jesus, that he thinks he's Elvis, he thinks he's all of these things. And I haven't changed my mind about that. What I've come to realize is it takes that kind of an ego to be able to withstand the pressures that are put upon him. I think you actually almost have to believe that you're Jesus in order to have the courage to go out and do what he did. And for those of you that say, well, there's no any courage, no. Every single person that Kanye West used to have as a friend is not his friend anymore. Snoop Dogg is calling him an Uncle Tom. Kanye West, an Uncle Tom. Damn. This is why Kanye is so important, because you could say Ben Carson's an Uncle Tom, and you could say that anyway, Clarence Thomas is her Uncle Tom. Fine, but you're not going to be able to convince people that Kanye West is an Uncle Tom. And so for Kanye West to do this, it's enormously powerful. And I think, especially in that episode where what Matt Damon did was so brutal and so low and so cheap and really, really twisted the knife on something. It made me want to go out and get 5 busloads of people to the polls on first Tuesday in November. But it is an act of actual genuine courage, because none of his friends are his friends anymore. None of them. None of them will talk to him. You know, he gets calls from the President of the United States saying, you have to stop saying nice things about Donald Trump. I don't believe I will. Well, damn, Kanye, I'm with you. And as I said on I did a firewall called Kanye West Racist. Wait, what? And here's the premise, and it's a perfectly clear premise. It makes absolute logical steps. The Democrats and the left contend that only racists support Donald Trump. Kanye West supports Donald Trump, therefore Kanye West must be a racist, a white supremacist. And you begin to perceive a few holes in their logic there. So which one of these statements is not true? Maybe it's the "you have to be a racist to support Donald Trump" statement, because the other two are clearly on their face true. So it's an enormous deal. It's a very big deal.
And I think this is another area where the long-term consequences of this are positive when it comes to hope for the future of this country, because people are looking at this and saying,
Yeah.
wait a minute,
I don't wanna
African
live in this
American
country.
steps out of line and they come down on him like this. He was a demigod to the left until he stepped out of line and started supporting someone on the right. You want freedom of thought, black person? Not in this party, not in the Democratic Party. You get out of line and you are dead to us. And that's what they're doing to him. They are torching this guy instead of saying, you know what? Everybody has different views. I think he's a great performer, great entertainer. We're all free to speak our minds. Not in that party. And I
you're
think
seeing the truth.
people are catching on. Some of his fans are looking at that and going, wait a minute, what do they think of me?
And I just add that Kanye West took what he did, as everybody else has said, took real guts. While Matt Damon, up until last year, spent his career providing air cover for Harvey Weinstein. So, which one of those guys you want to watch or listen to from now on? Yeah. All right, folks, I got to get, I don't know what else to do with this headline. I was too kind to give this one to Bill or Scott. Almost everybody has a hobby. A lot of people collect things. I collect movies, for example, and I've gone so overboard with my movie collection that I had to make digital copies because there was no more room for the DVDs and the Blu-rays. And I've got this device. It's called a Drobo. It's this RAID array, and it's up to about 18 terabytes full of movies and stuff. I don't know. It's got to be 2,700 movies. And it's like the books on my Kindle. The movies I haven't watched stack up faster than the movies I have watched. And it's never going to end, and I'm never going to stop. It's a bad hobby, and I'm sorry I spent all this money and time on it. That said, I came across a headline last week. FBI seizes over 3,000 penises during raid at morgue employee's home. Oh. People, don't do that. I shouldn't have to tell you not to do that. I've been saying it week after week and month after month. These are Heinlein's crazy years. We're just living in them. And stories like this, either you laugh or you cry, and I'd much rather we laugh. So let's leave it at that until next time. Thanks for your membership. I hope you're not sorry, and we'll see you next time.